Welcome to Pub Natter in the Exeter Arms, where the pints are flowing, the chat's questionable, and tonight's guest already knows what we're going to say. That's right, we've got a psychic in the snug. Will they read our minds, or just read our bar tab? Either way, grab a drink and brace yourself. Spirits are high, and not just the ones behind the bar.
When rain stops play, it's time for some Pub Natter.
So, we're in the Exeter Arms in Uppingham, in Rutland, and we're with Justin.
Hello.
And Alex Woods, who's the landlord of the Exeter Arms.
Good evening.
And we're with Diana Mary Rose, who is a healer, psychic, and an author, and we'll discover lots more about you later on. First and most important question for Alex is, what's your favourite drink?
My favourite drink, well, funnily enough, I'm teetotal. So for 4 years I've been teetotal.
Wow.
I found it's probably the best way to make a living as a publican.
There's irony.
Yeah, it's very much how we make our living. I mean, I've got a long link to the place itself, but yeah, I don't drink at all. But
Wow. Food? Favourite pub grub? Do you eat?
Oh, I definitely eat. Yeah, that's how. I think as I've got older, I'm a bit of a traditionalist when it comes to pub food.
You're going to say steak, aren't you?
Well, no, not really, but because Caroline is she can't eat dairy, so I take the opportunity when we go out to do things like pastry and things like that.
Okay.
So I do have a penchant for a pie if there's one available.
There we go. Second most popular.
Yeah. So if I see a pie on the or a chef special or something or other with pastry, I tend to bag that.
Cool.
Have we had anybody yet that hasn't said steak or pie?
I think Tim Sexton said scampi and fries.
Right.
Yeah, like in a basket.
Yeah.
There's something, when you put it in a basket, it changes.
But see, us Brits, we can pretend all we like, but we are simple birds when it comes
Yeah, we
to.
are. Big shout out to June's from June's Farm, who makes the best pies in Rutland, without any doubt.
Absolutely.
That's great. Diana, what's your favourite drink?
Favourite drink is cider.
Any
Because
particular
I
one?
I was born and brought up in Herefordshire.
So what would your go-to pub stroke restaurant meal be?
Yeah, I would always go for fish.
Yeah.
So and it could be salmon, which I think is wonderful. It could be a seafood paella, or it could be dear old fish and chips.
Yeah.
But every time I'm in the pub, I'm looking for the fish on the menu. So yeah,
That's good call. Let's talk about your backstory. So where were you originally from?
I was born in Uppingham, funnily enough, but then I ran away from Uppingham at 17 years old, screaming, as most teenagers did back in the day, and then ran back screaming in my early 30s. And I spent my time. I trained to be an actor, so I sort of spent my time gallivanting around various parts of the country and other parts of the world.
Oh wow!
Then ended up teaching it and things like that.
Yeah.
And then ultimately returned back to Uppingham in 2003, which is not a hotbed of the arts, if I'm honest.
No. Although we have got a few people who went to Uppingham School, haven't we?
Oh, sure. Yeah, there's one or two. I mean, and I do stuff now. But I started working for Uppingham School, funnily enough, because I settled down back in Uppingham and, of course, had to pay the rent. So I retrained as a gardener, as a landscaper and whatnot, and worked for Uppingham School for over 10 years. I have my children here. And then life changed once more. I met Caroline about 9 years ago, and we moved to various places, did various things, and eventually I've always known this place. It was my local for years. I ran the football team here, and various other things. Sang in a band here.
Oh wow!
Frequented here quite often. Some say too often. And then in 2018 we came to someone's retirement party here, and Caroline was approached to run the place. So we've been here ever since. And in that time, I'd like to think that we've sort of taken a bit of a rough diamond that people had affection for, but was synonymous with being a little spit and sawdust, and turned it into quite a tiny little boozer. And and it's gone well since, really. I mean, we've done really well with the beer awards and whatnot through CAMRA. And we're one of only 2 beer-only, wet sales-only pubs in the county.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
it is a proper pub
Yeah.
in the sense it's hard to describe, but it's quite eclectic.
Oh.
And
Yeah, I mean, it was 3 cottages. I mean, if you look carefully, we're sat in someone's front room. That was the pub area there, and then where they play pool is another one. And where the door behind the bar is, where the cellar is, that was also someone's front door. So this whole bit was lots of small cottages that eventually the pub encapsulated, And it's been here for about, it's been registered as a brewing, as an official public house since the middle of the 1800s. But it was an ale house long before that.
Wow.
So yeah, it's got a past.
Yeah, it certainly has.
And and the way we see it is, we're only borrowing it. It's our turn to borrow it for a bit, and it's up to us really to make sure it's worth passing on. I mean, it works well for us. We've got a new girl in tonight, and hopefully, I mean, she's away studying. Apparently, she's doing forensic science. But I says, well, hang about. You might have some case studies here if you work here long enough.
NCIS up in them.
Well, quite. But she's come here. Her parents are both in the police force, and they've said if you want to learn about human people and nature, human nature, and go and work in a pub. And they're right. I mean, that's the bit that keeps it interesting, I think, is this place. There's people with mortarboards on their head talking to people who've just been using a mortarboard, and they're both doing a crossword together, and that's kind of this place, really.
That's nice. So, have you dug into a little bit of the history behind this place? You said it were cottages. Do you know anything about them?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's lots of stories about it, and of course you have to wade through the stories. I mean, there were 23 separate ale houses in Uppingham at one point.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. I mean, the word pub.
That's the norm.
The word pub's a very
days.
broad term, though. Sometimes it's just someone's front room with some taps in. Particularly during the wars, a lot of people, both here and in places like Melton Mowbray, when they had the airfields and stuff, they opened up the front of their houses and just put beer barrels in them, and that was a pub.
Public house.
Yeah.
But how many people live here? I mean, 23 ale houses.
Yeah, I mean, there was.
Small place.
Yeah, I mean...
Not many. Less than now.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's 2 closed in the last 10 years, 2 of the main pubs.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not very many at all now.
There were 16 in Ketton.
Yeah.
16.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, 13 or 16, I can't remember, but yeah, it's a big
16,
number.
yeah.
There's one
Wow.
now.
There's one left.
Yeah.
Come on, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the nature of it, unfortunately. But I mean, one story in particular, I mean, this is very, very, very pubby. But there's a stone extra arm sign above that door, the door at the front on the roadside there. And apparently that was someone paying off their tab, did that. They actually did a stone version of the sign to pay off a bar tab that they couldn't pay, which I thought was a nice touch. So yeah, I mean,
So although it's dated 1868, it wasn't necessarily.
no, that's when formal brewers and suppliers basically before anyone started paying properly, I think, and it became registered as. But there are conversations that go back about 300 years, I think, in terms of the building itself being a hostelry of some form. Uppingham was a very different shape back then. A lot of the buildings around you, this would have stood on its own at some point.
This would have been quite out on a limb here. Wouldn't it?
Yeah, and there'd be nothing that side of it.
Yeah.
Would have been sort of farmers' cottages or something like that. Or?
There's tied cottages. There's 1 or 2 as you go up this bit, but then the buildings get a lot newer, and then the school bought a lot further on than that. All the playing fields and whatnot. That was all arable. I mean, even when I was a kid, there wasn't much past 100 yards up here. There was one estate, and that was out in the middle of nowhere. The rest of it was arable, and you could say the same about the whole the town. I left the town in 1989, and I would say it's more than doubled in size in that time.
Yeah.
And I would say the population's probably gone up even more.
So Diana, why don't you kind of start off by telling us about your backstory? Where were you originally from?
Well, I was born and bred in Herefordshire, and in a very, very lonely spot. I was actually born in an 18th century cottage on the top of a hill, right near the Welsh borders, and brought up there. Very few neighbours, almost no friends. One brother, a couple of years older, with a big garden. So I spent most of the first 18 years of my life really on my own, thinking an awful lot, chatting away to myself, although I would argue maybe I was talking to somebody on the other side. And certainly when I was very little, I used to talk to the fairies, because I had fairies in the garden. Yeah, absolutely. I used to chat away to the fairies. I used to play tennis with the fairies. I knew exactly where they were in the garden. There were certain
That's
locations
a bit of a
where they
one-sided
were.
contest because they're teeny tiny, aren't they?
And they had different lights. I knew that the fairies had lights, and they were different colours. And I spent a lot of time. I mean, I suppose it was all very real to me. Although maybe, and I was apparently a very silent child, so I didn't really tell people very much at all. In fact, I remember my dad saying, when I was quite old, I don't know how old I was, maybe 40 by this stage, and he said, well, we never really knew what was going on in your head because you were so silent. But I wasn't aware that I was silent at all. I thought I was chattering away 19 to the dozen. But I was obviously in my thoughts talking to somebody else, not to my family. So yeah, it was a very lonely existence, but I think that really set me off on a sort of a kind of world where I was very philosophical, very, very interested in deep subjects. And certainly, I mean, one of the things I remember when I was small was that I knew that you're born, and then you grow, and then you finally grow very old, and then you're sort of reborn again. It's this recycling thing.
So you knew this from quite an early age?
I didn't know it was reincarnation, but I knew that that's how the world works.
So how did you know that?
Well, I just knew it. It was obvious. It was part. I came with that understanding. And then one day, I think I was about 7 or 8 or something, and my mum said, oh no, that's not the case at all. No. You die, and then that's it really. Just sort of rotting in the ground. And I was absolutely petrified because that didn't make any sense to me. And I thought, well, no.
So you had a real clash of beliefs.
Yeah, and then but when you've got a parent telling you, oh no, it's just the end, that's it. You kind of start, you go into yourself. So you thought, well, I must be. I don't want to look like an idiot by saying these things. So you become even more silent. And I think this is the case with a lot of psychic people. Is they're very private people because they've learned.
Full disclosure, I'm a bit of a skeptic. I'll warn you.
Yeah, people will
front.
be. Yeah.
But having said that, I'm kind of agnostic rather than atheist on it. So
Yeah.
I've never tell a religious person that they're wrong.
Yeah.
I'll just tell them that I don't share their belief.
Yeah.
Similarly, so reincarnation as a small child, living in a fairly remote place. Where do you think that the idea of that might have come from? Because if you weren't particularly exposed to people with that? I mean, was it a religious community where you lived? Did you go to
not
church?
at all. No, never went to church ever.
Because
No.
obviously Christianity kind of talks about reincarnation in that there's you're reborn in heaven, and a lot of religions have some version of recycling.
They do.
I don't think any of us really like the idea
Yeah.
that's it. You're just an accident of atoms, and then you're gone. But I just wondered where.
No, I know. We never went anywhere near a church at all, ever. No, it's not that you learn it from someone. You simply come into this world with that understanding. And then you get knocked flying by an atheist parent who says, "No, that's a load of rubbish," you know. But that was certainly an element of my early years, and I'm always a very green person, you know, off with the fairies in the countryside playing, and in my own sort of what you might call fantasy world. But I did have some very severe phobias when I was a small child. I was absolutely petrified of World War One from the moment I heard about it, probably from the age of 3 or something. World War One sent shivers down my spine, absolutely petrified of it.
Well,
whenever there was
understandable.
a film on TV, you know.
What was it? Was it the suffering? Was it the waste? Was it the futility of it all? What
Everything.
What jarred
Absolutely
you?
everything. But I think the terror that it could happen again, because I realised much later on, and this has taken many, many years, maybe 20 years more, 30 years on, that I actually had a past life in World War One as a soldier, and I died in World War One, that was something obviously I didn't understand as a child, but it did make sense to me when I finally realised this. It made perfect sense of a phobia that was ridiculous, because there was no purpose to it. There was no reason why it should be there. And so when I was in my 30s, I went along to a healer I know, back then, and said, "Look, you know, Can we do something about this? Get rid of it, you know, because it's with me for life. You know, I really want to get rid of it." And anyway, so she did some healing, and she said, "Well, look, go home, sit in a bath, relax. I'm going to send some healing to the whole situation." So there I was in the bath, sort of almost falling asleep. You know, when you're in that halfway house between being awake and asleep. And this was the most extraordinary, one of the most extraordinary experiences I've had. I became that soldier boy. I simply became him, and I realised he was very, very young, maybe 20 or something, and I was in a tunnel. This is the classic thing. There's light at, you know, a long tunnel, there's light at the end, right? I'm in the tunnel, and at the end of that tunnel, I could see about 4 people, their arms. I couldn't see the people themselves, but I could see their arms stretching down into the tunnel, ready to pull me out into what is, I suppose, what you call the afterlife. I could see them, and then the whole thing changed to me emerging out of the tunnel, and I was in a terrible, terrible state. And I was saying, you know, I did the best I could. I tried, you know, all this kind of business. And I heard, and this was telepathically, because this knowing, these words came straight into my head. It doesn't matter whether you did well, whether you did badly, whether you were good, or it doesn't matter anything. The only thing that matters now is healing, and you will be sent to a healing temple to recover from this experience. So, yeah, I mean, as a skeptic, you say, well, she's making it all up. But actually...
No, that's not true. I don't... no, I'm very careful to clarify this. I've had long debates with fundamental Christians in Tennessee and the like.
Yeah.
And whilst I don't share their belief, I will never ever ridicule their belief.
Yeah.
I'll never tell them they're wrong.
Their
I'll simply, it's just.
Yeah.
So I don't absolutely do not say that you're making it up or anything like that.
No,
because that would be unkind.
No. I mean, it was the most incredible experience, one of the most incredible experiences of my life, really. And at the end of that, things improved significantly. But that was World War One. Now, since then, I've done a lot more work on World War One, and also through meditation and doing a lot of Reiki and all these kind of things, which make you a lot more psychic as you do them, and they do. What I call the clairaudience has become a lot clearer, and what I'm hearing, I hear now things in my head explaining and so on. So I now understand that lifetime a lot better, what it was, why it was there, and so on. So yeah, but it's all esoteric stuff, and it's way beyond the imaginations of most people in the country. Mm-hmm. But yeah.
Do you believe that you've had your gifts in your previous lives?
Yes, in most definitely.
Because if you spoke like this in the 15th century, you would not have had a good time.
No, and I didn't. I mean, I've had several past lives where I have been persecuted. That has been interesting in itself. I mean, I've come across certainly one in the 16th century where I was sort of hung up on a gibbet and as a witch. Whereas I wasn't a witch, I was a healer. But, anybody who was stepped outside the church then got massacred, I mean, as we know. So yes, I have had several lives that I know about where I have been persecuted, and I think this is the reason why, when I came into this lifetime, I was a very silent child, for fear of persecution, and I still have that now. I don't really.
Well, to be honest, even in the early
advertise.
60s, did you go to like a regular school when you were a child?
Yeah, sure.
Was it a Church of England school? Most of them were.
Oh, probably.
And you had like assembly and everything.
Yeah, usual stuff.
So,
yeah.
Because we all did.
Yeah.
I mean, again, having those kind of ideas, things like reincarnation, in the early 60s, you could have got quite a hard time for that.
Yeah,
I mean, it's harmless enough.
I didn't really speak, and I didn't really have any friends. It was only when I got to university at 18 that I actually made real friends. I didn't really have any friends up until then. And they weren't thinking on my wavelengths, and also we weren't talking in a deeper way. And I think when you get to university, people are relaxed, they discuss all sorts of things, and actually, the interesting thing is now, when I look at the friends I've had over the years, a lot of them have been pretty psychic, and I just like them. But I suppose like attracts like, doesn't it? And one of my best friends at university was clairvoyant. She was always coming out with little things.
Can you just, for our listeners, can you explain the difference between a psychic and clairvoyant?
Well, psychic is the sort of... Yes, good point. Psychic's a generalisation of somebody who is hypersensitive and has certain gifts which most people simply don't have. So that's just a general word. And then you've got the different types of gifts. Now, a clairvoyant will see the future coming, and that will be a visual picture. They will see things in their mind's eye, and they will know that those things are coming. So that's a clairvoyant. A clairaudient, which is what I am, is somebody who hears people's voices. I hear people talking in the afterworld. And that has built up and built up and built up over the last, say, 15 years. So it's now become a very strong gift indeed. It started off with hearing the odd word. You know, clairvoyance will be starting off seeing the odd ghost around, or seeing the odd thing, you know, and then gradually they start to see more and more and more. It becomes clearer and clearer what it's all about. And then you've also got somebody who's omniscient, which is somebody who simply knows. They don't know why they know, but they know it. I'm not going there tomorrow, and they don't even know why, and then they find there's an accident and, you know, they didn't go. But there's such a strong sense of not doing something because whatever, that would be
I must admit, I've had that sense on occasion, but I've always gone ahead and done it anyway, and I'm still here. But there are occasions when
you get a funny feeling.
You just think, don't. I'm not sure I should be going there. It just doesn't. It's not right. But I used to fly all the time, but every now and again, I would just get really twitchy about the flight that I was about to take.
Yeah.
One time, I spent the evening before writing down on a piece of paper for my wife where all the insurance policies were, and I was convinced.
Wow.
I mean, I was wrong.
Yeah.
Obviously.
but yeah.
Yeah.
So that sensation, I can get that.
So do you, like we're sat here now, I mean, it's noisy, and we've got headphones on and stuff, so that must be really distracting. But have you a sense of the afterlife, as you say, around us now?
Not at the moment, because I haven't switched on to it.
Okay.
I'm just chatting away. I mean, you can switch on and switch off, and that's what you will find with all psychics. Because if you couldn't, you go mad.
Yeah.
You know,
you'd have it all the time.
You can't cope with all the, all the interference in a way. And also, I mean, I think a lot of clairvoyants have huge problems with time, because they're half on the other side and half in this side, and you can cease to function if you're not careful. So no, you need to ground yourself, and you're either here or you're at home meditating and
so
whatever.
With clairvoyancy, where people are looking at your future,
Yeah.
do you still have agency? Are they telling you what's going to happen and there's not a damn thing you can do about it? Or are they giving you a warning that if you don't change something, this might be the outcome?
Yeah, well, I'll give you an example from me from in my 20s with my ex-boyfriend. Now, this was an interesting one because my mum wanted to go and see a clairvoyant for fun. You know, it's the sort of fun, thing to do.
It was the 1970s.
Yeah, and so I said, I'll come along as well, because she was very well-known clairvoyant in Cheltenham, I think. So we both went along, right?
That's a great place to be a clairvoyant, Cheltenham. You get really rich being a clairvoyant in Cheltenham.
Yeah, I suppose so.
I thought you were referring to Glastonbury just up the road there for a minute,
no,
and the ley lines. And
But
No,
anyway,
I'd love to be a clairvoyant in Cheltenham this week.
So off we went anyway, and I was really in love with this guy. I mean, I was just hoping he was going to ask me to marry him. And so he went along, and this clairvoyant said, "Sorry, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Forget him, and move on." And that's all she said. And she said, "I can see a wonderful future for you. And I can see a lot of boats. I can see a river with a lot of boats, and you're going to meet a wonderful man there." And she just cut him off completely. And of course, I was completely devastated, totally devastated. But anyway, so a year later, 9 months later, blow me, it all collapsed. There was a total calamity. It was absolutely devastating, and I thought it's no good. I'm going to have to apply for another job. And lo and behold, I got a job in Newcastle on Tyne. And it was only a while afterwards I thought, oh, hang on, there's a very big river with a lot of boats up there in Newcastle. And she'd seen it. But she didn't say what the problem was going to be, but she simply said, look, it's not going to happen. You know, you've got to move your thoughts onto something else. And then there was a major disaster, which pulled us right apart. So that's a clairvoyant, spot on.
That's all for now, but don't put your pint down. The spirits haven't finished with us yet. See you in part 2.